All right, shalom, 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 peace. Welcome to another episode of Messengers of the Covenant Library Chronicles. It's your brother Amath IQAhmath, first name. IQ is all the same. All right. I know it's been a while. I understand. I know. But nonetheless, still got another good one for you today. I want to cover this book and get some highlights out of this book called Imperial Rome by Motc, edited by Time Life Books. Circa 1965, right? Imperial Rome. For you brothers that's out there teaching, man, aspiring to be teachers, man, want to relay information to your people, you've got to know a little bit of history, man. I'm not saying you got to have a PhD in history or whatnot, man, but you have to have some background knowledge of history, okay? Especially Rome, which represents the fourth beast spoken of in the scriptures by Daniel in the 7th chapter, John the Revelator in Revelations 13, right? Second Ezra, you know, he spoke about the fourth beast in Second Ezra, the 11th and the 12th chapters. So in order to understand the prophecies and understand this beast that rose up, you got to know about Rome, all right? So let's look into this book a little bit, man. Let's get some little nuggets and tidbits. I encourage brothers, that's out there teaching, man, get this book if you don't already have it, because it's a fairly easy read. It's good, information in here. If you want to know about the rise and fall and the intricacies of Rome, this is a good book for you. There's plenty of other books out there. I'm just giving you one of the ones that I have that would be good for brothers to start off with your journey in understanding Rome. So let's open up, man. First thing we see here is a map. This is one of the things that you're going to need to acclimate yourselves with, brothers. If you're not familiar with geography or learning about maps, when you're reading these scriptures, man, don't just be ignorantly reading and you see these names, Thessalonica or Philippi or Iconium or Cyrene and all the, yeah, you don't know where they're at and who you can't do that. You want to go match them up and get your atlas. One of the earlier library chronicles that I did was to make sure that brothers had atlases. Sisters that's out there that want to acclimate yourself, single sisters, or that's getting taught by your husbands, make sure that y'all got these tools on deck so that you can, look and go along with the storyline and you can kind of track where brothers were, right? So let's look over here. I just highlighted a couple of things in mind. You got Philippi, Thessalonica, Corinth. Obviously, we know that these are some of the places where the churches were being established at, right? In the northern parts of Greece. You see here, Byzantine, Constantinople. When you're talking about Constantine and the Byzantine Empire, this is where they were at. You see over here, Nicaea. Everybody's heard about the Council of Nicaea. This is where they were at. Smyrna, Ephesus. You're reading about the seven churches in Revelation, the 1st and 2nd chapters, 3rd chapters. Iconium. You read in Acts 14. The apostles was catching hell in Iconium. Iconium was a notorious place, man, for the apostles to go put the work in. They was getting stomped, and stoned. Paul got stomped out, man. The apostles ran up on him. They thought he was dead. He rose up, they got out of there, and then they came back because they had to continue the mission to teach, man. So when you read about these areas, you want to familiarize yourself with some of these places, man. Tarsus, you see, that's where Paul was from. Right? Antioch. You see up here? Even when you're looking at geographies regarding rivers, you see Mesopotamia, Syria, down here, Judea, Jerusalem, Petra. This is one of the areas that Esau was ruling in Petra. You understand? Babylon, the Euphrates. See? Then you get into northern Egypt with Alexandria. Much history going on in there. Cyrene. See? So just looking at the map is a helpful tool. You see up here where the Scythians was coming from, and the barbarians that's being mentioned of in Acts. I mean, not in Acts. It's like I can't think of it off the top where they were mentioned, but they was in the scriptures, right? See the Caucasus Mountains where Esau was coming from, between the Black and the Caspian Sea. There's the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea. Caucasus Mountains here, this is where Esau was coming up out of. That's where he got banished to. When brothers started ruling. You understand? You see up here, Parthia. When you read Acts chapter 2, when it said all of them came down to Jerusalem to keep the Pentecost, it said Parthians and Medes. Well, this is the area of Parthia. Down here where the Persians was at, this is where the Medes would have been. You feel me? So this is why it's important for us to know certain things. All right. So let's look a little bit more up in here. Here you see an assault tower is rolled toward the wall of Avricum, where the Romans staged one of their greatest sieges. So you see here the might and the power of the Romans, right? But look what it says here. Masters of war. Masters of war. So when you read about Daniel 7 and it says that this fourth beast had teeth of iron and stamped out the residue of them, of men and whatnot, it's talking about how the Romans came through with strong military might and subdued all kingdoms and all men prior to them. Genesis 27 and 41 lets us know that Esau was going to live by what? By the sword, right? So look at this. It says, he who desires peace should prepare for war. This maxim by the military writer Vegetius was a keystone of Roman foreign policy, and Rome's standing army remained unequaled for centuries. Unequal for centuries. So look at the parallels between Rome and America. America has remained unequaled for centuries. Unequaled. They had small wars and skirmishes, let's say in Vietnam or, Afghanistan, Iraq, the Persian Gulf or whatnot. Some experts may say, oh, yeah, well, America lost the Vietnam War because they retreated. Afghanistan, they lost the war because they retreated. Man, America got what they wanted out of it. Diplomacy, they shut down Vietnam, hit them with Agent Orange. Vietnam ain't recovered since. Look at Afghanistan. They back to rioting and killing each other over there, man. America came up on all the resources, all the diplomatic relations with the rest of the Middle East, shut them down, got the poppy fields to get the heroin trade continuing on and rolling and getting money. And at any point in time, man, America could have bombed them, bombed Afghanistan, bombed Vietnam, and turned them into dust if they wanted to. Same way with Rome. They remained unrivaled for centuries. The only war that happened on this land right here was Esau fighting amongst itself in the Civil War. No other nation has came over here and tried to enact war with America. So, like their predecessor, this is where the scriptures speak about the little horn coming about the fourth beast. This is America. They, in tune, in lockstep with their predecessors, Rome, are masters of war. America has the biggest military in the world. Over 700 military bases throughout the world, man. They're prepared to go any place on earth. They can mobilize within 48 hours and hit any place in the earth. Right? So let's continue on. It says, in building their military machine, the Romans borrowed weapons and tactics wherever they could find them, from the Macedonians, the Carthaginians, the Spanish. But the real strength of the army lay in its men. Romans were bred to warfare. Isn't that what I just said earlier? Genesis 27:41. And by the sword shalt thou live. That's Esau, man. That's Idumea. That's the Idumeans. Romans were bred for warfare. The aristocracy produced such brilliant generals as Julius Caesar and Pompey. The common people contributed fearless infantry. Roman warriors fought, said Josephus, a Jewish historian who lived through a Roman siege, as if their weapons were permanently attached to them. Imagine that. So if anybody's wondering if Esau is the white man or they came from Rome, man, there you have it. Prophecy being fulfilled. Let's move on. Let's see what else we got up in here. This is the chapter about the gods of Rome. Now, again, I'm just highlighting what's going on in here, right? This is on page 121. And let's just look at the religious structure of Rome from its inception and then as it grew. It says here, at first the religious community was the family. Then as Rome grew, it became the village, the city, the state, and finally the empire. So ultimately, Rome wanted to establish itself as everyone praised the empire. The emperor, when they did have a monarchy, they wanted to be worshipped. as gods, similar to, Egypt was doing it like that. But look at the parallel with America. What do you have to do? When you're, elementary school, you're pledging your allegiance to the flag. You understand what I'm saying? That's the same thing that Rome wanted. Rome wanted complete obeisance by its servants to the empire. The empire was your religion. That's why America is laying out all these bogus policies that want people to pledge their allegiance to America and its policies out there. Be it passing laws on abortion, passing laws on these gender wars with the misgendering of people or whatnot. You dig what I'm saying? So these are the type of things that they want people to aspire to, and they turn into subcults backed by policies that the empire pushes. So look at this. It says, in its earliest forms, when the ancestors of the Romans were still simple shepherds and farmers, this religion was almost pure animism. The gods were not persons, but impersonal spirits, and they resided in everything, in trees and rocks and birds and beasts, in the grass of the fields and the lightning in the sky. These spirits, or noumena, were totally amoral, neither good or bad, and with no special affinity for man. So here you see some of the gods here, right? Look over here. This on page 122. This is talking about the different gods that they had. Salaki for the camera work. I'm moving on the fly. It says, Mars was the spirit of the season of growth and harvest, which also was the season of warfare. Why I bring that out? Because Mars, which is what the name March, or the month March is named after, Mars was the spirit of the season of growth and harvest, which lets us know when the spring season begins. So this is why it's important when we're dealing with the calendar and we're calculating, when do we start our Passovers or whatnot. It was always still based around multiple cultures and multiple nations acknowledge that springtime always begins between March and April. So that's just another reference. Let's see what else we got in here. Let's look at some of the borrowing that they've done. Page 124. It was the Etruscans who also who gave Rome its earliest significant contact with the Greek gods and goddesses, many of whom the Romans eventually absorbed virtually unchained. Jupiter now advanced still further to become synonymous with the Greek father god Zeus. Venus, the numen of charm, became without effort the radiant and lovely Aphrodite. Similarly, Juno took over the attributes of Hera, Greek goddess of women and marriage, Mars of Ares, god of war, Mercury of Hermes, the god's messenger, Diana of Artemis, goddess of the hunt, Minerva of Athena, goddess of wisdom. Diana, we read about Diana in Acts 19, when many of the Jews who were following after heathenistic customs known as Gentiles were still observing Diana. Female worship, goddess worship was going on heavy within our people. Where'd they get that from? Okay. See up here some of the animals that they were held in high esteem in regards to worship. The owl, some of the flowers, the cyclamen, the bells, the bees, the peony, and ultimately what? The eagle. The sacred bird of the Roman legions. The eagle was said to bring on lightning and thunderstorms. So what is it? Why did they choose the eagle? Because it was supposed to bring down destruction, shock and awe. You understand? So when you read about this fourth beast in 2 Ezra 11 and 12, it's known as the eagle. Daniel didn't have this vision to understand what the beast was. He knew it was a beast. He said all he seen was teeth like iron beast, the ferocity that this beast came with. But Ezra completed the vision and said that beast had talons and was like a eagle. Okay. And that's where you see that came from. Just like America in Deuteronomy 28. And it says, in a nation, we're going to serve a nation that came from afar, swift as the eagle flieth, paraphrasing. This is where they get the same concept because they live after their predecessors, Rome. Okay. So, even over here, back to page 124, get information regarding Saturnalia, dealing with Christmas and the pagan customs that come along with that. See this? The merriest of these was a Saturnalia held in December, a carnival that probably originated in the rustic celebrations that ended the autumn planting. At Saturnalia, slaves were given temporary liberty to do as they pleased and were waited on by their masters. People exchanged gifts such as small dolls and wax candles, and a mock king was crowned. So this is where you get the histories regarding Christmas. So see how this one book, man, you can get a lot of information out of one thing. You understand? That's why it's important to, check these things out. Let's move on over here. You even see, gives a little history regarding the Jews under Roman rule. Look at this. Besides Christianity, the only major religion to survive the impact of Roman domination was Judaism, symbolized by this 7-branch candlestick or menorah from a relief in the ancient Palestinian catacombs of Beth Shiraim. You see that? So archaeology showing that the menorah was what was being upheld by our people. Moving down, it says, scattered in small settlements throughout the empire and surrounded by pagans, the Jews clung to their belief in one God and to the literature, laws, and language which had united them as a people for some 1,300 years. So although we were surrounded by paganism, we were being ruled by another nation or whatnot, we still clung to our traditions, our laws, and our language. Contrary to some beliefs, some may say, oh, well, the Israelites start following after the Romans and did everything that they did. Not all. There's always a remnant. So similar to us, we keep a different calendar for our holy days, even though we recognize the Roman Julian calendar for our work purposes and, daily accountings. But we utilize our own calendar to maintain our laws and our commandments. Continued on, it says, although they lived under chronic suspicion for their strict adherence to the monotheistic God, the Jews of Rome enjoyed periods of genuine toleration. Augustus even decreed the synagogues were inviolable and that Jews were exempt from appearing in court on the Sabbath. So just like here in America, America has the First Amendment, freedom of religion, the right to assemble, freedom of press, so forth and so on, right? It's tolerated. This is why brothers are allowed to go out and teach on the street corners, to get amplified sound, to rent out venues, to do all kind of things, to teach and promote the word of the Lord, because just like in Rome, it was tolerated, until it wouldn't be no more. And Yahushua talked about that in Luke 21 and told us that those days would be coming up short. Similar to what we see here. It says, Palestine, however, was a Jewish state which had been ruled by some Romans since 63 BC. Seething under the supervision of the unpopular procreators, the Jews rose up in fierce rebellion in 66 AD, but this uprising and other sporadic revolts which followed were soon crushed by the legions. So this is what's known as the Roman-Jewish Wars. I believe there was 3 of them, where, the Jews, we tried to put up a fight. We tried to rebel against the system, and ultimately we lost. 70 AD came in, man, we got crushed, lost Jerusalem. The temple was sacked and destroyed under Vespasian and the son Titus, and ultimately we lost. So continuing on, it says in 135 AD, the Jews were driven out of Jerusalem and forbidden to re-enter, a dispersal that was to last until the 20th century. All right. So getting early history regarding that. Let me see something else, a couple more things. Very important history regarding the Dark Ages. See these brothers right here? This is known as the Tetrarchy under Diocletian. It's the 4 rulers. He divided Rome into east and west rulership. He had 2 Augustus, titled rulers in one section, and 2 Caesar rulers in the other, as he was responsible for resurrecting and upholding Rome's rule when Rome was in dire straits economically, invasions from the barbarians. Rome was at a crippled state when he took over, I think in around 248 AD. I might be wrong on that, but don't quote me, but it was definitely in the 2nd century. But these were brothers. 293 AD, it's right here. Why don't I just read it? Sharing the rule. The Tetrarchs, whom Diocletian, Tetrarchs means 4, Diocletian, second from the right, established, hold on, let me see something else. 293 AD, I should, I'm just read it. Sharing the rule. The Tetrarchs, whom Diocletian, Tetrarchs means 4, Diocletian, second from the right, established, hold on, let me see something else. 293 AD, I should, I'm just read it. Sharing the rule. established to help administer. Shalaki with the focus. Let me make sure it's good. Come on now. Administered the empire in 293 AD are shown embracing in the stone sculpture now standing in the Piazza di San Marco in Venice. So second from the right, this would be him right here. Okay. This gives more information in regards to the Dark Ages. You're talking about Marcus Aurelius. You can read, you see the little movie about him in Gladiator, right? See, but look at this right here. This is interesting. It says 3 centuries between the great age of Marcus Aurelius and the overwhelming of Rome by barbarians in the 5th century AD is often called the epoch of Rome's decline and fall. But Romans who lived in those centuries did not know it was falling. To them, the business of the empire appeared to go on as usual. Petty tyrants paraded as emperors, rich men dressed up in senatorial togas. Roman soldiers went forth to battle barbarians, even if they did it more for money than for the glory of Rome. But the key thing is here, Rome was on its it was at a point where it was declining. It was in dire straits economically, stretched thin with multiple wars with the barbarians and whatnot. But guess what? The people were running around saying it was business as usual. They was all walking around like zombies. Does that sound familiar? All hell breaking loose here in America. The economy's crashing. Inflation's crazy. Wars going on. Rumors of wars going on. Pestilence and plague happening. And people are still walking around here shooting each other up at Juneteenth festivals and the whole nine and acting like ain't nothing going on. Sound familiar? All right. So this also gives some history regarding Septimius Severus, known as the African Emperor. There's another book called Septimius Severus, the African Emperor. Also letting you know that this brother came from the line of the Phoenicians. He was kin to Hannibal. It said that he also came from a Semitic bloodline. So this lets you know, man, Septimius Severus was a Jake. He was an Israelite. And he was one of the Roman rulers who rose up from the military and helped establish order back during a time when Rome was faltering in dire straits. Okay, one of the things he employed was taking care of his army and taking care of his brothers. Okay, so if you see here, it says Severus' cardinal principle of government was simple: take care of the army, and the rest will take care of itself. Enrich the soldiers. He advised the sons who were to succeed him and scorn other men. Sounds like love thy neighbor as thyself. You understand? So he employed those things. You see down here, it's talking about the state of the economy. They had to raise the taxes. People was getting jacked up. But Septimius Severus was doing the best that he could by trying to incentivize things with war. He was giving all of the soldiers lavish gifts. They would have rings and all kind of stuff out there. It was almost like, come join the army, you can ball out. And that's what was making people want to recruit to come in and help build up stronger defenses. They started winning back wars. But the ultimate thing that it did was it started crushing the economy even more. Overspending on the military, lavish gifts, enticing, people to come out. And look what ended up happening. Look down here, page 142. It says, thus, paradoxically, higher taxes led to a decline in revenues. So because of his spending with the military and doing all those other things, they had to raise taxes on the people. So it says higher taxes led to a decline in revenues. At the same time, the numbers of the poor increased. To ease their burden and allay their unrest, Severus systematically distributed food, money, and medicine, putting an additional strain on the imperial budget. Oh, so what happens when the people is out there hurting? Give them stimulus. Sound familiar? Stimulus, welfare, EBT, SNAP. See, systematically distributed food and money, medicines to get Medicaid and all that, putting an additional strain on the imperial budget. So this is why when you read history and you try to figure out what's going to happen to America, you're seeing some of the same things happening, ultimately crushing it. So look down here on page 143. Inflation gripped the money market and the price of the goods soared. So, I'm just highlighting this. I implore brothers to get this book, especially if you're a teacher, you out there trying to get the word out to your people. You want to understand more about these prophecies? You want to understand how America's going to fall, just like its predecessor, the fourth beast? You see an inflation, high prices on goods, so forth and so on. Same thing. All right. So let's go over here. Now this is important too. Check this out. The rise of the Mayas. Why are they talking about the Mayas in the book about Rome? Well, let's look. During the years when Rome was lapsing into its long decline, a civilization 6,000 miles to the west on a continent unknown to the Romans was approaching its peak. By the 4th century AD, the Mayas, who modeled the figure above from clay, had begun to build what was to be a great glittering chain of temple cities throughout the rainforests of modern southern Mexico, Guatemala, and the British Honduras. Notice the date there. It says by the 4th century AD, the Mayans had rose up to power, right? And it's being recognized all the way in the east. The Romans was hearing and knew what was happening with the Mayas. Why is this important? Because in the 4th century AD, this is the apex of the start of the Dark Ages. 4th century AD to the 14th century AD. That's 1,000 years. You can look it up. Go look it up on Google. What's the years? What's the year span of the Dark Ages? You'll see 4th century to around the 14th century, right? So like 400 AD to 1400 AD, just to keep it simple. These are all approximations as dates, so don't quote me on it, but just imagine 400 AD to 1400 AD. That's 1,000 years, right? At the same time, the Northern Kingdom was ruling in the West, starting in the 4th century. So you're seeing a duality of rulership for the Northern and Southern Kingdom ruling the world at one particular point in time. See that? This is why they included this in this book, Imperial Rome. Let's look at one more thing. This right here is the catacombs. This is the place where the Christians were digging out for places of burial and for escape of persecution. But look at this here. Look at this. This is Christ and the disciples. Dark-skinned brothers, man. And don't say, oh, it's because in the catacombs, the dust and dirt made them dark. And no, look at the garments. Look at his brother's hand. See, even when they try to lighten them up a little bit from the time, but look at Yahushua. That's what they, when you hear E40 talking about he had a Lord Jesus perm, that's what they getting images like that. See, look at this. Christ and the apostles are seen in a fresco from a Roman catacomb. As in most Christians painting into the Middle Ages, Christ is portrayed clean-shaven, for the Romans regarded beards as the mark of barbarians. So brothers, you want to know why certain jobs and occupations tell you that you got to shave your beard off? Because they looked at it as barbaric, thuggish, intimidating. You know, Esau didn't want that, man. You got to be clean-shaven. They got that from Rome. But you see there, those are all brothers. Look down here. Catacomb art often featured Old Testament scenes like these 3 Hebrews in the fiery furnace as they mourned their dead. Christians took comfort from reminders of other earlier martyrs. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, look at their hands. Look at that. These are all brothers, man. So not only are you getting dark skin imagery from archaeology in the catacombs of Rome, but they kept it real in regards to what our people look like. You're getting history in regards to the fall of Rome, the intricacies of Rome, right? All in this one book. And this is just one of many that I have, but this is a good one to start. Imperial Rome by Moses Hadas. Brothers, go ahead on and invest in it. Sisters too. All right, if you want to get a little bit more information on it. It's going to conclude this episode of Library Chronicles, Messengers of the Covenant. It's your brother Motc, IQAhmath, first name, IQ, it's all the same. Y'all be well until the next time. Shalom.